All right, Mel, what are we going to talk about right now?
Funeral home stuff.
Oh, so yay, old mortuary. Why don't they
Hmm.
call them that anymore? Remember how it used to be called the mortuary?
Yes.
And
I think
now
they're
it,
still called that, but it's not
do
as common.
you? I
Maybe?
think that they're trying to soften the blow now. And so they're just trying to call it something that's more genteel
Funeral
and
home.
less to do with dead bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, have at it. Go ahead.
Okay. So we actually use the same funeral home because we live close to each other. So our experience is only one experience, but I think there are some universals about the funeral home experience. Do you think?
I think so.
Yeah. So for instance, you go to visit the funeral home to select the services that you want for your newly dead
Person.
love of your life or whoever. But usually, I mean, if it's your spouse, then usually you kind of like them. Sometimes not, but anyway, so you go there and you're expected to make all of these big decisions, awful decisions, and expensive decisions in like the worst mindset that could possibly be in the entire world.
In like a week since it's
Yeah,
happened. Or
I
like
mean,
actually like 3 days. I was there
yeah,
like
like
three or
two or
four
three
days.
days. Mm-hmm. And they hand you like papers and you're supposed to make some sort of sense of it. And then they have these like packages and they can provide this, they can provide that. And you're just like, okay, okay, okay,
I
okay.
I just remember the whole time thinking like, why does any of this matter? Because my person is dead and this is stupid. I don't
Yeah.
care.
For me, the time when it, like, the gravity of the situation really came like crushing down was when they walk you into the casket room.
Hmm.
And can we just talk about caskets for a second?
There are many
What
kinds.
and why in the world are they so much money?
Yes. And also the person is dead, so why does it matter how fancy and expensive it is?
But there's this feeling. Did you read Michelle Obama's book Becoming, right?
Mhm.
She talks about how their family got in a fight when their dad died about how much to spend, I think on the casket specifically, because there's this feeling that if you don't spend enough, then you didn't love yourself because you want to give them the very best, right? And so if you don't give them the very best, you don't love them. But at the same time, I mean, it's not like they're enjoying the cushiness of the casket,
They're dead.
right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. How
They're
did you choose yours?
First of all, I remember walking around that room, the casket presentation room or whatever it's called.
Whatever it's called.
I mean, and I have a hard time with focusing as it is, let alone focusing in this death situation. And I first just looked at prices after I
Did
had
you?
wandered around for like 10 minutes being like, "Where am I? Why is this happening?" Yeah, and it was so hard because I remember it invoked so many feelings in me of this is stupid. Also, I guess I should care because maybe Scott cares, but I really know that Scott does not care. I could seriously hear him in my mind saying, "This is so dumb. Like, I don't care. Just pick one." But at the same time, in life, Scott cared about things that were
Mm,
matching and that were going along
yeah.
with whatever. And so ultimately, the one that I picked, it ended up being a decent price. It wasn't too much, but it wasn't offensive. I don't even know the word. It seemed fine, and it ended up matching one of his wedding rings because, as we know, Scott had two wedding rings because he needed options. So,
So
but the
funny.
thing that was my favorite, which made it even more ridiculous, was our particular funeral home had statues that they would sell you to put
Hmm.
in the casket, which I also don't understand why. Why? They're dead. Do they want the
I
evil in
feel
there
like
with
it's,
them?
do you feel like they're kind of taking advantage of you a little bit, and this desire to like show the person that you love them or to make it special somehow. So they're like, you can put a statue or a placard on the inside or all of
It's
those types of things.
definitely a business. Now,
Mm-hmm.
my personal experience at that funeral home, I knew the family, or I know the family that runs the funeral home, and so I don't feel like I was treated as somebody that they were trying to like sell and upsell to, but I could
Yeah.
see the hierarchy of the business model in there. Of course. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Yeah.
Even more so with the headstone place I went to, which was separate from the funeral home.
Yeah, that's a whole different animal. I remember looking at the caskets and just thinking like they're all awful. Like I don't want any of these.
Mhm.
And here's the truth of the matter. I feel like they're probably marketing to a different crowd, right? My
Yeah.
grandma, she picked her own casket out. It was like baby blue and like shiny, you know? And I was just like, so I have my choice of like these oaks and these really, heavy wood grains or like pink or Mary Kay blush, or whatever. I was just like, what the heck? But I did feel like I had a little bit of inspiration there. Because I was like, what would Jason want? What would Jason want? What would Jason want? And it like came to my mind, like ask them if they have anything that's matte black, not shiny, but something that looks like cool. So they like took me to a book and I didn't even ask him how much it was. I had no idea. I didn't even think about that. I just like said yes. And it turned out I was lucky because it was one of their cheaper caskets. But and then I had so much stress after I chose it. I was like, "Oh, I don't know." But my little brother went to the funeral home to see it and I was like, "Brent, what do you think? What do you think?" And he's like, "I don't know why, but when I saw it I thought TIE fighter." And I was like, actually, that for some reason that put me at ease to hear him say that because I was like, yeah, Jason would think that's cool. So,
So strange. Well,
but
and
they
then
have like waterproof ones or they
yeah,
upsell you on the ones that like lock closed. It's
I know.
bizarre.
And then I think I remember this correctly, Anita. Don't they also talk to you about the vault?
Yes. So you have in some municipalities, you have to have both a vault and the casket, which is like so much. But I remember just being like, I don't care. But my dad was like, you should not get the waterproof vault because we know that in such and such years that the water actually gets in there. And I was like, what he said, I don't even
And
know.
tell everybody what your dad has been doing for a job up until this year.
He was the public works director and he was in charge of like all the water, the storm drains. He knows everything about aquifers and how the water percolates and he like water is his love except for now it's solar power.
Oh, he's changed.
That like he
Okay.
retired so he walks around his house all day checking how many watts each appliance is pulling and whether or not they've got enough amps from the solar cells. Anyway,
So
that has
basically,
nothing to do with
if
anything.
Anita's dad says that you don't need that, then you don't need it because
Yeah,
he's
except for that it makes
power.
people feel better because again, why do you need them not to get wet? Like it makes me feel really gross to like when it's raining to think like, ooh, the water is getting on Jason, but I don't know why.
Well, then, I mean, that could lead to the discussion of embalming.
Mhm.
And
That's
is
true
that
too.
important? Is it not? Does it matter? Does it not?
Well, kind of in like today's society it matters because we like to have a viewing that happens 7 days after they died. And like in the olden days, you couldn't do that because people decompose. And
Yeah.
I know that there are some places that allow you to get buried directly in the ground, but you have to like be buried within 24 or 48 hours.
Yeah,
It's like a
different cemetery.
health code thing too.
I think different cemeteries have different rules. Isn't that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
I asked our funeral director what the deal was with embalming. I said, Why? And how long is it going to last?" And he goes, "You know what? Sometimes we've had to do exhumations for one
Oh,
reason or
which Mel
another."
was like, "Ooh,
I mean,
why?"
I'm all about like forensic details, of course. So
Yeah.
then I was listening to him. And he said there was one where I think they had to exhumed the body after 5 or 10 years or something like that. And he goes, it was pretty impressive. This particular body didn't even look any different hardly than when we buried this person.
Wow.
But he said it just depends on the person, and it's
A lot
different
of
for
factors,
everything.
probably
Yeah.
like warmth and humidity and all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But it didn't used to be that embalming was
Yeah, there was
required.
no such thing. So you want to hear a funny thing? My one grandma on my dad's side was such a funny lady. And she once at the dinner table at Sunday dinner was like, "Do you know why they embalm people?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "It's to make sure they're dead. So we don't bury people who are still alive." And that started this big conversation about how we should get phone service inside of caskets in case we bury people who are actually alive so they can like call for help. And it was a very bizarre. This was many years before it was like not funny anymore, you know. But that was her
Okay.
theory on why we embalm people. It's to make sure they're dead.
Nice.
Yeah. So after all was said and done, they give me this bill. Okay. And I feel like I'm a fairly intelligent person. I still can look at that bill and have no idea how they calculated what they calculated. I mean, it's just like it doesn't make any sense at all. I feel like they could bill you for whatever and you would have no recourse.
It's because it's a business.
I know, but it's also a business that's business model is dealing with people who are in no place to be able to make any judgment calls. And also, there are certain things that you cannot opt out of. You have to have that.
Okay,
Like they charge
question.
you for their refrigeration of the body, like, oh, please, I would like to opt out of that. Don't put them in the refrigerator. You can't do that.
I have a discussion topic for you on this.
Mm-hmm.
I want to
Mm-hmm.
see what you think. Okay, so let's say that there are those people that live to a ripe old age. They
Mm-hmm.
have a will, they have a trust, they have all of the things in order. They've even maybe picked out their own casket, like
Yeah,
your
like my
grandma,
grandma. Yep.
and they're aware of all of the costs. And then their life insurance pays for their funeral, or they have something like funeral insurance or something.
Or
Okay,
they have like prepaid for their funeral plan.
yeah. So
Yeah.
there's that end of the spectrum. Now, let's look at ours. Sudden
Mm-hmm.
death, young, unprepared, no plans of this stuff.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's easier for us to get taken advantage of or be blindsided to certain things than the older people that live a long
Hmm.
life and are planned out? And do you think that we are so kind of bugged by it because it is unexpected, but they've had all this time to process, well, this is just how it is. This is the business
Yeah.
model of the funeral industry. What do you think?
I think that it could go one of two ways. So I think that there are people who do pre-planning and they like try and think about those things, but I also know that like those prepaid funeral plans don't include everything. Like if they choose things that are more than that, then you have to pay more. Like I'm pretty sure that happened with my grandma. They prepaid for their funeral, but it didn't cover all of their costs. And when you do that, it's not like they give you a breakdown of those weird costs. Like nobody goes in and they say, well, your whole package is going to cost $5,600. It's just like if you're going to get your appendix taken out, you don't know the exact dollar amount until you get your bill afterwards, which is like crazy in and of itself. But it's the same thing there. So if you're prepared and if you've done your research, yeah, I think that probably it's harder to take advantage of you. But I also think on the other hand, there's a lot of people, and especially like if you think about as you age and your mental capacity might decline a little bit and you're not able to research those things, maybe you have dementia, maybe your family's caring for you, then I think it would also be just as easy to take advantage of those people also. So I think it is like a both.
It's tricky.
Yeah. And I know that there are like some scuzzy like funeral homes that really are just trying to get as much money out of you as they can. And I didn't feel that like that about ours, but I still felt like there's no way to make an informed decision about what you ask for because there's like all these weird costs in there.
Yeah. So I
So,
need a question for you again.
mhm.
Now that you've gone through this and it's caused you to think of your own funeral plans, what would you do for you?
I don't, if this hadn't happened suddenly and I had time to think about it, I'm not sure I would not have cremated Jason. like, I used to think that was really weird just because culturally it doesn't happen as much. And it didn't happen as much historically where we live, but I think it's becoming more and more common. And I might have done that. And I don't know about
A
me.
lot
Now I kind of,
cheaper.
yeah. And you don't have to have a plot. And yeah, you don't have to buy a casket. You can rent a casket for that. You have to rent a casket if you want to have a viewing and then they cremate you.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, somebody was telling me you can buy a used casket and they were like, "How could you need a used casket?" And I was like, "I know the answer to this. It's because they use them for bodies that they're going to have a viewing or a wake for, and then they're going to be cremated. So they're not actually burying them in the casket."
Wait, if you're just gonna have a rented casket to put a
Mhm.
body in, why not make it fun and pose the person like on a bench? They
I
do
think
that in
there
some
are some
cultures.
limitations to
I'm
what
kidding,
you
by
can
the way.
do
I'm kidding.
and what will be upsetting to people.
Yeah, that's true,
So,
I guess.
yeah, I don't know. It's just, I think now I want to be buried next to Jason. But again, why? I don't know. It's an emotional thing. It has nothing to do with practicality because it's not like we're going to be holding hands. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
There are many options people choose. There's cremation, there's
Hmm.
burial, there's donating bodies to science.
Yep. That could be a whole topic in and of itself, Mel.
Yes,
Maybe we should save that for another discussion
I
because
think we
there's
should.
lots of things about that
Yeah.
that can happen. But yeah, I just the funeral home thing. And then there's like the memorials and the thumbprints and the what you can put on the inside of the casket and the using their facility for the services and the programs and the all of that kind of stuff.
Next question, did you have a viewing for Jason?
Hmm. I did. And about 1 billion people came. And the funniest, but not funniest, was his students that would come and were just so awkward, oh, and they would walk up to
They're
me.
14, poor
Mhm.
kids.
And
Oh,
they're like super traumatized, and they would look at him and they would just,
oh my God.
"I love Mr. Cool," and I gave everybody a hug, and I was like, "Thanks for
Mm,
coming." Anyway,
we
yeah.
had a viewing for Scott only the day of the funeral
Oh,
because,
really?
well, my uncle died
Mm-hmm.
before Scott died. And so everything for him was the day before. And to be
Yeah.
honest, I'm really glad that I only had to do all the funeral
Mm.
stuff for Scott on the
On
same
one
day.
day. Yeah.
Like
That was a crazy
drawn
day.
out. Yeah, it's so exhausting. And yeah.
Yeah.
But
Do you
we
know
had
how much sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say we had a hard time finding a location that was available also.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing. Do
Mhm.
you know how much your funeral services cost?
I know how much the entire bill was
Yeah, how
ish.
much was it?
It was like $18,500 to 19,500. It was somewhere in there.
That's
But
really
I
expensive.
know, and because you know why else? Because
Why?
Scott, of course, had to go out in dramatic style and
Oh, yeah,
die
die in
out of
another state.
state.
Yeah. So there was like you had to pay for a funeral home in Idaho. You
Mhm.
had to pay for them to transport him here, and then you had to pay for a funeral home here to do all of the stuff.
Yes,
Oh,
and I think to
the
transport a
hair on
body
my
over state lines, at least into our state, they have to be embalmed first.
Oh, okay.
So he had to be prepped there and then shipped down
Shipped.
here. Yeah.
Was it
Cargo.
Prime? Did they did they
What?
ship him Amazon Prime? Was it
Yes.
2-day shipping?
It actually probably was 2-day shipping.
I think the total cost of Jason's was $9,000, and that was with a really cheap casket.
I'm jealous.
Hmm.
Mine, yeah, mine was double then.
Yeah,
Bummer.
yeah. And the casket didn't have all like the fluffy stuff on the inside. Like it was like fluffy where they like open it, but the bottom part was not fluffy and
You
like
know,
cushy and nice.
one thing that's funny is my uncle that we just mentioned that died right before Scott, he said, "When I die, don't do anything fancy, just bury me in a pine box."
Yeah.
And he used the same funeral home I think that we did, or in tandem with the one that was like nearby. And they actually did find a pine box and
Yeah.
it was super cheap and it looked great.
Well, I
Got his
mean,
wish.
options, options. Well, for anybody who is recently gone through that experience or hasn't gone through it and will,
Or not even
are
recent.
yeah.
Maybe, yeah. We want to hear your experience. Comment below.
Tell us all about your funeral home experience and whether you feel like you got ripped off or they tried to upsell you or you felt like it was a good and happy experience.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Anita.
Okay, bye.